Hello and welcome to Politics Today, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Ozanga. As always, let's bring you up to speed with the things we've been tracking in the polity. But let's tell you first that meeting is ongoing, the National Economic Council meeting, headed by the Vice President statutorily. But the urgency of the matter and the importance of that meeting had the President join that meeting because they have to agree on a new national minimum wage. What will it be? As at the last count, the federal government was proposing 62,000 naira, while the NLC and the TUC, the organized labor, are still pushing for 250,000 naira. Well, how things will play out as soon as we get that breaking news, we'll bring it to you. But first, let's also tell you that the Aviation Minister, or the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Mr. Festus Keyamo, says some private aircraft operating in Nigeria are being used for money laundering, drug trafficking, and other illegal activities. Mr. Keyamo disclosed this at his office in Abuja while inaugurating a ministerial task force committee to checkmate illegal private chartered operations in the country. Though he did not mention the names of the airlines, he explains that this illegal activity has made the sector lose billions of dollars and has raised serious security concerns. The minister further stated that some of those involved in the illegal activities are those who acquired licenses for non-commercial flight operations, known as the PNCF, but have totally gone against the stipulated agreement of their licenses. The 8-man committee is to be chaired by the Chief Executive Officer of Aero Contractors, Ado Sanusi, and they are expected to report back all findings to the minister within the next 3 months.
It has come to our attention through a series of disturbing reports that the practice of illegal charter operations is thriving within the aviation industry, thereby undermining the efforts of the regulator, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, and other regulatory bodies. These illicit activities have not only resulted in significant financial losses to the federal government, but have also raised security and safety concerns as the operations of private aircraft owners have remained largely unchecked and unregulated. This has also resulted in the use of these private aircraft for other illegal activities. Last week, the National Security Advisor wrote to us, alerting us of the spike in money laundering, drug trafficking, and other illegal activities through the use of private aircraft in the country. It appears that private non-commercial flight operators, PNCF holders, have become increasingly emboldened, continuing their illegal operations with the assistance of air operator certificate holders who collect tolls and list these illegal charters under their AOCs.
Well, those are the concerns raised by the Honorable Minister for Aviation and Aerospace Development, and they are genuine concerns. But let's see how that committee will report back and see what plays out eventually. But let's talk some politics, and it's in Rivers State. Now, political supporters of the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, have criticized the governor, Siminalayi Fubara of Rivers State, for blaming Mr. Wike for the explosion that occurred in Port Harcourt on Tuesday. The politicians who spoke under the banner or the aegis of Rivers Leaders Forum are unhappy over the repeated accusation against the minister. The group's leader, Senator Olaka Owogo, said it was implausible for the explosion to be linked to those who participated in a solidarity walk for Wike, as the site of the explosion was not part of their route, and asked Governor Fubara to take responsibility for protecting the lives and property of the people in the state. Also speaking, the Director General of the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency and former Chief of Staff to Governor Nyesom Wike, Emeka Woke, questioned why the State Commissioner for Health, Dr. Adeze Ore, allegedly took over responsibilities from the police in handling the explosion incident.
The main aim of the march was to bomb Presidential Hotel, where he housed the members of Senate Committee on Privatization and Commercialization. How do anybody know that he housed his guests at Presidential Hotel? is the governor and the commissioner for health, the police detectives and other security agencies. Commissioner for Health addressed a press conference to say that an explosion has taken place and instructed that all health establishments in Rivers State should watch out. In less than 1 hour, only them have arrested someone. In less than 1 hour, they have cordoned in everywhere. They would allow Nigerian police force and other security agencies to do their work. The Rivers people are tired of this drama. In the same manner, when the governor heard about his impeachment in the State House of Assembly, of course, he orchestrated the bombing of the assembly and promised Rivers people that he was going to set up an investigative team to fish out the culprits. From October 2019 date, we have not heard anything about it.
The office of governor is a creation of law. And that office must be conducted with the rule of law in focus. When that office veers from the rule of law, it invites anarchy. If a governor covets his seat and intends to keep it, his best bet is to stay within the law so that the citizens of that state will continue to abide by the law. But if the governor himself chooses to flout the law, then he confuses his people, and then he calls them to anarchy, he calls them to self-help, he calls them to march for their own survival. We want to tell the governor that the way to keep his tenure, the way to keep his office, which we pray he should be able to do, is for him to stay within the law.
Well, sometimes you wonder when this back and forth will be over. We can't wait for the cases on appeal to be called by the honorable justices so that pronouncements will come and everybody will know where their fate belongs. But that was not all that happened today in the polity. Apparently, there was an event today where Chief Ozekome was the guest speaker or guest lecturer reviewing the 25 years of our democracy. And from the perspective of the Honorable Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, he felt that the guest lecturer did not see anything good in Nigeria or any progress made in 25 years of Nigeria's democracy, and he was quite unhappy. Let's take a listen to his reply.
We should do away with political corruption, which we all know very well, where people in government take a larger chunk and the people they govern are suffering. Nigeria is suffering. Let nobody deceive Mr. President, sir. My president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, are suffering. There is mass poverty. There is degradation. There is anger in the land, sir. Don't let your minders tell you something otherwise. I will advise Mr. President, sir, go incognito one night, just wear something, disguise yourself, go out and see the anger in the land, the hunger in the land, the squalor in the land. That from 192 naira per liter, a liter is now between 550 to 800 naira. Small scale industries, which usually is the hub of a country, is virtually dead. Who can buy fuel to power a small face me I face you generator to do barbing? So he must look at this. He must begin to block all loopholes and cut the large size of government.
I made some points. This, but to be wrong, sitting here without correcting some impression. First of all, we are talking about democracy 25 years. We know we have challenges. I expected the lecturer to say, yes, we have made some progress. In all his lecture, not one progress was made. Criticism. Are you telling me that for 25 years, we have not made one progress? Then we can say, yes, we have made this progress, but there's still room for us to move forward. Just like Shehu Sadi said, how they were locked up, how they were detained. Can he say under this democracy, any Nigerian have found himself under that state? That's a progress. That's a progress. You say we should give the impression, see we have not made any progress. You have said here about infrastructure, FCT. You have said here FCT. Who is FCT minister working under? Who?
The president.
Mr. President, which means he has the capacity to do those who can help him move the country forward. That is progress.
Well, everybody had their say at that event. It depends on where you're looking, and everybody has seen from their own perspective. So everybody's allowed to give their own submission. But those are not the only stories we're tracking for you. Let's bring you our political roundup stories before we start the first conversation for the day.
The National Assembly has passed a bill for an act to amend the Appropriation Act 2023 to further extend the implementation of the capital aspect of the Appropriation Act 2023 from June the 30th, 2024 to December the 31st. It also passed a bill for an act to amend the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2023 to further extend its implementation from June the 30th, 2024 to December the 31st, 2024. The sponsor of the bill, Senator Okpeyemi Bamidele, led the debate on the general principles of the bill presented for the first time on the floor of the Senate. Meanwhile, the Senate has resolved to summon the correspondent from Guardian newspapers to its Committee on Information, Ethics and National Orientation to explain why disciplinary action should not be taken against him over an online publication on the purchase of a presidential jet, which the Senate describes as false. The resolution was taken after the Chairman Committee on Appropriation, Senator Adeola Olamilekon, called the attention of the House to a publication on the Guardian which speculates that the purchase of a new presidential aircraft was the subject of an emergency sitting by lawmakers today. In a voice vote, the lawmakers supported the summon of the newspaper reporter before its committee. The Senate President gave the committee 1 week to report to the House. The immediate past governor of Kogi State, Yahya Bello, has asked the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court Abuja, Justice John Soho, to transfer his trial in alleged money laundering to Lokoja, the Kogi State capital. At a resumed hearing on Thursday, Bello, represented by his counsel, Adeola Adedikwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, informed Justice Emeka Nwite that the letter requesting for the transfer of the trial had already been delivered to the Chief Judge for his administrative decision. Adedikwe specifically said the request for Lokoja was due to the fact that the Federal High Court has territorial jurisdiction to hear the matter in Lokoja, the Kogi State capital. However, the request for transfer was vehemently opposed by the EFCC lead counsel, Kemi Pinero, who described the request as an attempt to frustrate the trial. Meanwhile, the court has fixed July the 17th for arraignment of the former governor and ruling on the request of the EFCC to cite the senior lawyers for contempt. The Nigeria Governors Forum is assuring workers of a better minimum wage, even as it adjourns its meeting to further consult with stakeholders on the matter. The communique issued by the chairman of the forum after a meeting that lasted into the early hours of Thursday notes that the governors are desirous of a better minimum wage for workers. Although the chairman of the forum turned down any media interview after the meeting that held at the NGF Secretariat in Abuja, the governor of Zamfara State says the forum decided to adjourn the meeting to enable it consult further on the issues of a new minimum wage and that of the local government autonomy, which were extensively deliberated upon at the meeting.
You remember, or you've seen what the president said? There's going to be consultation with governors, so we haven't met yet. Likely we may meet tomorrow, so it's only when we meet, then you know the outcome. Still discussion is ongoing because it is something that concerns everybody, and it's something that we have to do justice with.
All right, welcome back. Let's get to the first conversation for the day on the program. It has to do with the economy. There's a meeting, the National Economic Council meeting. Not sure whether it is over by this time, but at the last time they were on because the president had to step into that meeting over the issue of the new minimum wage. Government is here to agree to an amount presented to them by the tripartite committee. Labour is insisting on 250,000 naira as the lowest amount or the least amount for the lowest cadre worker. But the government is proposing, government and the private sector are proposing 62 naira. 62,000 naira, I should say. I don't know what is 2,000. 62,000 naira. And that has been this back and forth. The president had, in his broadcast, said he's going to send a proposal to the National Assembly, a bill to that effect, because it has to go through the National Assembly for it to become law. But he said he's not going to send it yet. He needs to consult further, which is why he's consulting at the moment to make sure that everything is put on track. Our debt burden is over 100 trillion naira. Macroeconomic indicators from inflation, which is food and headline inflation, they're in high numbers. Interest rate, quite high. FX volatility. I can go on and on. The numbers and the bearish zone. What exactly is going on? I want to make sense of that situation in the first part of the program. We've been joined on the program by an economist. Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Emmanuel. So two things are happening. One had already happened, which is the extension of the budget, 2023 budget. We had 2023 budget and we had a supplementary budget, all of which was pushed to 30th of June, which is tomorrow. But of course, the National Assembly has now extended the implementation to the end of the year. So we may be having 3 budgets concurrently. You may have to explain that later on the show. But let's start with the issue of the minimum wage. The president joined that meeting. In your thinking as an economist, what are the variables they will be considering right now, in your view, that should be the right variables to consider before they can come to an agreement which will not cause an implosion or an explosion, literally, from the end of labor, maybe in rejecting or accepting?
Thank you, Joe, for having me. I think that in the whole minimum wage debate and in the protest of the Nigerian Labour Congress, with due regard and respect to them, the Trade Union Congress, and considering the events that has happened in Nairobi in Kenya within the last 48 to 72 hours on the 2024 finance bill that was withdrawn by President William Ruto, and the fact that today, for good reason, Nigeria is a low-trust society, and anything anti-government is actually, it comes in the front burner. There is a temptation not to have an inclusive debate. There's a temptation not to give the government the benefit of doubt, because the optics and what I call moral hazard of some kind of expenditure that is not exactly emotionally sensitive and intelligent to the plight and suffering of millions of Nigerians, considering the inflation of food over 40%, unemployment, underemployment, and the exchange rate devaluation, it's made it very difficult for the government to present its position to the people, And I also think it's very important for Nigerians to understand that minimum wage is not only about the government. In the federal civil service today, you have about 720,000 federal civil servants in the register, even if you will argue that biometric verification will reduce the number of ghost workers in the system by thousands. For Lagos State, for example, out of 20 million Lagosians, only about 0.29% of the people in Lagos work for the Lagos civil service. That's about 58,000 to 60,000. So the question is, if we focus all our attention on the government, how about the private sector? How about the organized private sector? NASME, NECA, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, NASIMA, and the unorganized private sector. Are we talking about sections 3.1 of the National Minimum Wage Act of 2019 that says that if your establishment does not have up to 25 people, you're not bound by the provisions of the National Minimum Wage Act? Do we need to reduce that from 25 to 5 to bring more people? Because small businesses that employ between 5 and 20 people form a major percentage of the workforce in Nigeria. Do we have to look at issues like employee casualization, which, to my surprise, the National Assembly and the NLC are not even considering? Because today, as we speak, for the organized private sector, you have major companies in the manufacturing sector, in the financial services sector, where over 80% of their workforce are actually under contracts. HR outsourcing is a thing and is a major issue across the formal sector in Nigeria? Are we looking at issues like HR outsourcing, employee casualization? Are we looking at issues like the fact that not all states have the same economic conditions? What an oil and gas service contracting firm in Lagos can pay its workers, or a bank in Lagos can pay its workers, is not the same thing a filling station in Owerri, or a filling station or a hotel in Yobe can pay its workers. Are we considering that it's important for the states to negotiate the minimum wage based on the conditions in the states? Does it make sense to impose a blanket federal minimum wage across all states in Nigeria and the federal jurisdiction? Or does it make sense for the president to allow the states to negotiate their own minimum wage based on their own economic realities and conditions? These are the nuances to the conversation I've not seen. The whole debate since it started, since the NLC and TUC decided to go on a strike, has been on increase the minimum wage, increase the minimum wage. But do we understand that the government is actually not the only party bound by the Minimum Wage Act? Do we understand?
Okay, so, well, I didn't know you were throwing that question. Maybe you're throwing it to Nigerians. But as far as Nigerians are concerned, there are things they are looking at and they are not satisfied. The workers, I've had a conversation with Joe Ajero, the NLC president. We've had a conversation with Festus Osifo, the TUC president. And one of the things that you always hear in that conversation is the fact that government is not demonstrating some level of will to lead from the front. So if the country is in high debt burden, numbers are in berry zone, in the reds, we can call all the numbers that you and I are familiar with, from inflation to FX and all of that, nothing is looking good, at least for now, based on those two reform policies, given subsidy removal and the flotation of the naira. They are saying that governance, the government must cut costs, and the governors are not sincere enough. Now, okay, they are saying that subsidy has been removed. More monies are coming into the states. We're sharing 1.2 trillion. Sometimes we have as much as 1.8 trillion, and then we have to share so that there's no much money supply in the system. So for them, what is the excuse, or what is this excuse that states don't have the capacity to pay?
You know, Job, you know, at the expense of me being balanced, I stand the risk of, you know, people who are watching this politics today to say that I'm holding a brief for the government, but I'm not. You know, along with that revenue going up for the government, for the state government, the revaluation losses on FX, external loans that states took, has also gone up in terms of the principal they have to pay and the interest. I'm not holding brief for any state governor. I'm not also holding brief for the federal government. The pendency on existing debts, state debts, has also gone up. But this is not to take away from the fact that the governors have not presented a picture, which is what I called moral hazard earlier, to show Nigerians that they are accountable. There are state governors that have private jets on standby, and they pay thousands of dollars in rentals anytime they fly out of their states, either to Abuja or any other part of the world. Yeah? You know, in such very difficult time for Nigerians, maybe it's important for the governors to show example and lead from the front, like you say. No, for the sake of optics, to show the people that you are accountable to them. They elected you and the power belongs to them. Okay? But if we're going to look at the states, yeah, the finances of the states are not in very great shape. You know, most of the states are on life support. They depend on federal allocation. There are states where IGRO is actually less than 500 million naira per month today in Nigeria. And if you look at the fiscal sustainability of states index, you see that somewhere around 22 to 24 states are fiscally not viable. Okay? So the question comes to, if you raise the minimum wage to 100,000 naira per month, on paper, it's the minimum wage. In reality, can the governors actually pay? Can they reduce the cost of governance? Yeah?
Kelvin,
Can they focus
the argument,
the resources
Kelvin,
of the state? Can
apologies.
they increase the IGR drive? Then the question about IGR also comes into question. Can you tax businesses that are not making profits? Because based on the tax laws of Nigeria, any business that does not make at least 25 million a year cannot be taxed. So if you look at the index, for example, that measures the GDP growth rate in Nigeria, that has GDP growth rate less than population growth rate of 30% per annum, you see that consumer spending, business investment, you see that net exports and then government spending. On consumer spending and business investment, we've seen a drop because of demand destruction and the value of money today.
If I may button,
but on net exports and government spending,
you can hear me, Kelvin,
you've seen like an increase.
Can you hear me, Kelvin? Okay, if I may button. Okay, the argument again, let me speak on behalf of Labour, not necessarily holding forth for them and the people. Now, in their view, things were not like better or good per se, but before the policy of government, now the government has removed subsidy. Transportation has become harder. They floated the Naira. Importation, we are a high import dependent country. Things have become so expensive, but their wage or their salaries, depending on how you want to make the argument, remains the same. Should they just be looking and be listening to excuses and excuses and excuses of government? Because people feel that they are being stretched to the limit. Look at what's happening in Kenya.
Hold
on, Kevin. The issue of taxation was just a trigger to bigger issues. And that is where we are playing around even in our country, if we're not careful. Don't you think so?
I don't think the people should look while, the cost of living has gone up drastically. As a citizen of Nigeria, I'm not exempted from the realities that you have today. I remember I was complaining to a few friends that I bought ketchup for 11,000 naira plus for one ketchup, tomato ketchup, and how that is ridiculous compared to what it used to cost like 2-3 years ago. I'm not exempted from the reality. I eat rice, I eat gari, I know how the price of rice has gone up, the price of turkey has gone up, vegetable oil has gone up. These are the realities of everyday Nigerian. So I'm not exempt from it, But I want us to understand, I want Labour to understand that the entire federal and state civil service, in my view, is not up to 5 million Nigerians. So that's why I'm coming back to the issues like, how do you ensure that small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and more established corporations, both in the organized private sector and the unorganized private sector, are complying to the National Minimum Wage Act? Because even if you raise minimum wage to 200,000 naira today, only 720,000 Nigerians in the register of the Federal Civil Service will benefit from that increase. How about the other 208 million plus Nigerians, or maybe less than 100 million Nigerians, that you can say are in the workforce of the country? What happens to them? So that's why we have to go back to the other parts of the debate about minimum wage that Labour and TUC are not paying attention to, because, they get more reaction and more buzz from going against the government. For good reason, by the way, for good reason. How do we pay attention to the other areas of the debate that ensures that if the minimum wage is increased to 90,000 naira tomorrow by the president, the National Assembly passes it and the president assents to it, that the living condition of the average Nigerian, like the barber on the streets, like the mason, right, like the laborer, like the filling station attendant, is actually impacted positively? That's the debate we should have. Because the civil service in Nigeria, the civil and public service, I'm not sure is more than 5 million.
Okay, let's get back to everybody now beyond, because the minimum wage is like a pointer. We can't go to companies and ask them questions. So that's why there is a tripartite committee for both the organized private sector, the organized labor in the public sector, and the federal government as well as the state are sitting together. But there is a concern I would like you to speak to as an economist. Now, what has happened is that there is, allow my late term, the point of equilibrium in terms of stability, new definition of stability has shifted. Stability in FX used to be between 600 to 700. It has moderated, it's stable. Now we're talking about 1,004, 1,005. And projections are like stability will now be maybe around 1,000, 1,002. That means the quality of life has literally changed. How can Nigerians cope in this kind of situation? Because it will affect literally everything, as it has already affected.
Yes, the FX rate has affected everything, but you know, you need to understand that last year, this president, he had the option of either declaring bankruptcy, just coming and telling Nigerians that Nigeria is bankrupt, you know, we're going to go to IMF and beg, or embarking on the reforms that he embarked on, because Nigeria had like, you know, you had losses, swap losses, FX revaluation losses of anywhere around maybe 12 to 13 trillion naira, you know, and they had forwards they had to deal with, you know. The government had to decide, look, you look at all the subsidies, 7.5 trillion to service debt, nearly 100 trillion naira in debt, another 7.5 trillion to import petrol to Nigeria, to subsidize importation of petrol under recovery. Is gone from DSDP to PPTA. Then you have about 3 trillion naira to, 2 trillion naira to service power. And then you have about 3.6 trillion to subsidize FX. That's about 20.6 trillion already. That's in subsidies. The budget is around 28 trillion. And then you have to pay payroll, the civil service payroll. So the question is, what do you have for CAPEX? Nothing. Which means that if you don't have for CAPEX, government spending part of growing GDP is not going to be impacted, and you're not going to have any growth in the GDP growth rates.
Okay.
You know? So these were the realities last year, and this is the reason why, for the fact that you had a situation where the CBN had swap losses to banks and revaluation losses, and he had forwards to pay, and the fact that he didn't have net reserves, not gross reserves, because anytime this topic comes up, the CBN spokesperson is always quick to point to the gross reserves, not gross reserves, unencumbered net reserves. There's a law in central banking called the Guidotti principle that says that at every single point in time, your net reserves that are not encumbered must be equal to your balance of payment for 1 year. Nigeria's balance of payment for 1 year is around $7 billion. Nigeria's net reserves today is not up to $3 billion US. Net reserve, not gross reserves. So that's the reason why you've seen that there's been a devaluation in the exchange rate, because you don't have reserves to defend the currency. And the CBN practically had to go and borrow money.
So is that why perhaps we're going for... So my apologies, is that why we're going for the hot money, the FPIs, and now it's biting hard on our local industry?
Well, you see, one of the unintended consequences of raising your MPR to align with your inflation, in what is called the inflation to interest yield curve, or the yield curve differential, you have the MPR at 26.25%, is that you also have to adjust your NTB stop limits, or your treasury bill stop limits, you know. So basically, if you increase the MPR, you have to adjust the NTB stop limit, and you know, it's a natural consequence that investors will always want to come in because the yields are better for them and are more attractive. So that's what you're saying. You're seeing a situation where they want to come in, the central bank is trying to attract hot liquidity to the markets, to the coffers. You're also seeing a situation where the government is attempting to use treasury bill, open money market operation as a tool to mop up so much of money supply in the system, which is currently 97 trillion.
All right, Mr. Emmanuel, quite an informative conversation. We'll try, when we have another conversation, we'll try to break it down even further, because for the market woman, either in Sabo Ngeri or Mile 12 or Urwawat in Calabar or a Creek Road market in Port Harcourt, what they're interested in is how prices of goods and commodities and every other thing will come down. So whatever we speak in form of grammar in terms of macroeconomics doesn't make sense to them. How will things get better for them? They were paying XYZ yesterday, they want to pay XYZ today. Until we get there, no matter how much reform and praises we give in terms of our approach, wouldn't make sense to anybody. But I must thank you, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, always coming through to give us that professional insight on how these things play out. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back after the break, we'll shift gears to Anambra politics. Do you know that since 1999, only one man in that state has stayed as governor for 8 years, uninterrupted? And that person is Willie Obiano. There's an election coming and there's a new conversation. We'll find out what it is after this break. Join us again. Well, the elections in Anambra are still far away, 2025, because the administration of Chukwuma Soludo, the current governor, will come to an end in 2026. And then, of course, you almost doubt whether he will not run for re-election. But the background to this conversation is the fact that Anambra election is an interesting one. Since 1999, it's been an interesting journey for them. They've had some of the people that have been governor for the shortest number of days, as low as 14 days. So let's break it down for you. Mbadenuju, that man, Nchimoke, if we can go back to the first slide, Chimoke Mbadenuju became governor in 1999 to 2003. His administration there was tumultuous issues, and in fact, he didn't get a ticket to run for a second term. Chris Ngige came into the fray, and of course, he's from Anambra Central. But even his was contentious because Peter Obi went to court, and 3 years he was in court and finally got the judgment that he is the rightful person that won that election. He took over in 2006, but this is the twist. Just 8 months or 9 months into Peter Obi's administration, he was impeached by the House of Assembly. That's where Virginia Tiaba, the lady, came in from Anambra South. But Peter Obi was restored by the court sometime in February 2007, I should say. In 2007, there was an election. Andy Uba from Anambra South won that election and was handed over to. But Peter Obi went to court and said to the Supreme Court, look, my administration was supposed to start in 2003, but I started in 2006. I have 3 more years. The Supreme Court agreed. And Andy Uba ended up being a governor for about 2 weeks or 14 days, if you will. And that's how Peter Obi ran for re-election in 2010 and eventually left office in 2014. So his 8 years was interrupted. But the first man to run for 8 complete years, we're just talking numbers here, not the performance of the governors. Willie Obiano he was governor from 2014 all the way to 2022 before the election that came in and brought in Chukwuma Soludo. So you can see their senatorial districts, how they came about. So if you look at it critically, if I have my next slide, it tells you how the governance of the state has been across senatorial districts. So you see, 8+ years. The reason I say 8+ years, because when you add the Virginia Tiaba as well as Andy Uba, no matter how minimal, they were there. And then Anambra North, 8 years, 11 years for Anambra Central. And now an advocacy group within the APC is calling that this zoning must stay within the Anambra South, where Chukwuma Soludo is from, for fairness and equity. We're being joined in the program by Mr. Mike Mbanefo. He's an APC chieftain from Anambra City. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Mbanefo, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
The very first thing I want to find out from you, interestingly, is Anambra election gets very intense and at some point even dangerous. You want to explain to us why that is?
Well, with regards to Anambra election and its tumultuous nature, all these things come as a result of people not sticking to agreements. For instance, when it was the turn from 1999 till the time of Obiano, the Northern Senatorial District has never been on the seat of governance in the state capital. Now, there was this agreement chaired by Honorable Justice Obidigwe, who championed the cause that there is need for the Anambra North Senatorial District to be allowed to at least present a candidate for to be a governor. Coincidentally, Peter Obi then put his feet down and said, yes, it is proper for that agreement to see the light of the day. And as it were, the North was able to present Obiano, who went for 8 years. Currently, the agitation now is that there's nothing like zoning, which is a very surprising presentation from anybody, no matter who is making that assertion. There was that agreement on ground.
So, I know that in the APC constitution, they've always started the fact that there is no zoning in the APC. which the party you belong to. So why raise the issue of zoning when it's constitutionally inconsistent with your party?
Coincidentally, what anybody should face is what will benefit the populace of Anambra citizens. It is not about what is in the constitution of APC party. It is what is agreed. Even a blind man, even a deaf person, even the commonest person on the streets of Anambra knows that there's that agreement for people, for there to be rotational governance. And funny enough, it was that cause was championed by Anambra North. I am from Anambra North Senatorial District. And several of such meetings we had done, hence the emergence of Tony Nwoye at the time when he clinched the ticket of the party at that time. So it would be ridiculous and for anybody to say that because of whatever constitution, no political party has any rotation. Even the Nigerian constitution does not have any rotational anything. But what we do is because of the clamor from the north, that marginalization. You cannot finish crying about clamor and suddenly, for marginalization, and suddenly you want to marginalize those who felt that, yes, you need to be accommodated to be able to at least exercise your own governance franchise. An attempt to deviate from that will bring anarchy. I must be fair, I should be speaking for Anambra Northern Senatorial District, but truth be told, I don't think that people like Honorable Justice Obidigwe will want to even have anybody come to tell him that such an agreement never took place. There are things that are implied. There are things that normally is not envisaged that will happen. If the situation of the country is proper the way it's supposed to be, we shouldn't be having problem with this kind of things. Unfortunately, the Anambra North seem to have the weaker destiny. The population is towards the central and the south. So if we didn't do that agreement, there would have been no way till this day that the Northern Senatorial District would have had that chance.
Two questions. I'm trying to race against time. I want to take as much questions as possible. Two questions. Isn't it too early in the day? We have Edo, we have Ondo. This is still very far away. Isn't it too early in the day to begin to rattle the polity with all of this? And which zone is trying to produce a candidate to run against Professor Chukwuma Soludo instead of the candidate coming from Anambra South?
You see, whether the Chukwuma Soludo's government is being challenged by any senatorial district, what matters is whether you are APGA, whether you're APC, whether you're PDP, whether you're Labour. The fact is that the turn for the people to present the candidate is from the South. So it's left for the South to say, I want to continue with Soludo, or I want to choose an alternative candidate depending on the party that is fielding the person. So it's not about earliness per se, it's about what is presented before us at the moment. There are questions that if you don't answer them, you may confuse the people at the time when it is required for that issue to be resolved.
So other people may be thinking, the people who are not within the zones, and we've had conversations with politicians where we raise the issue of equity and fairness and zoning. For those who are raising the question of, rather than look at issue of equity, let's look at performance. Merits and all of these other elements that are important to good governance, shouldn't that be the most important element in this conversation, first of all, before we get to the issue of equity?
Well, when it comes to merit, APC had all it takes to field a candidate from the South. When you talk about merit, they've done very well. Most of the people who have ruled Anambra State before are very meritorious. Even the candidates that are coming out from the South are also very qualified, very, very qualified, extremely qualified.
Now, let me take you away a bit, digress a bit, because the APGA is still in charge of the state, Anambra State. As a matter of fact, there was a time APGA was across the southeastern state. It looks like, in honor of the Ikemba of Nnewi Odumegwu Ojukwu, ABGA is the ancestral home of, Anambra rather is the ancestral home of ABGA. How does the APC want to play into that to even have a chance to unseat anybody who is from the ABGA party?
Well, interestingly, persons like Peter Obi and even most of the people who are in APC now, they were all products of ABGA and some other parties. At least I recall that sometime in the lifetime of His Excellency Ikemba Nnewi, that's in the person of Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, I recall when he said, "This is my last wish." And that is when he was requesting that Peter Obi should be voted. And Peter vowed never to leave ABGA. But he left ABGA and still won election. Even while ABGA, he was the person that first won election under PDP and went into ABGA. The truth of the fact is that when you have many vehicles to be registered and you don't have a plate number that will accommodate all of them, you can take the next state plate number. It doesn't vitiate the fact that your car is your car. A political party and political nomenclature is a different thing altogether when it comes to personality. Yes.
So at the end of the day, let me just ask you a straight question, because I always ask this question whenever people who want to come and take over power come to the show. What are Soludo's failings that your party is seeing that you feel that, okay, this is going to be a good one to use to pitch against him and get him out of the seat?
Anambra State is a very peculiar state with very disastrous security issues. These are not for lecturers or professors or any catechist to come and address. You need somebody who has the capacity, who has the sagacity, who understands the street, who understands what it takes to take out all these miscreants from the street and not violate other people's rights. The issue is that there are so many things that are undone. For example, I come from the northern part of Anambra State. I come from Onitsha. I have not seen anything that has been done other than making some very funny laws left, right, and center that is not making. I'm not impressed with anything. So there are so many things to take out when it comes to that. So many things to take. I just don't want to undermine anybody, but if you ask any Anambra person, every other political party is getting ready to make sure that the incumbent leaves the seat.
That you want to do without trying to push up for a campaign necessarily. Maybe one or two things you think that he's not doing right that you think the party, the APC, can do.
He is very complacent with security, I'm sorry.
That's your view?
That's my view. That's what I know.
What security
the only safe town in Anambra State today.
Mbanefo, just hold on, Mr. Mbanefo. Is it the security in the state or the security across the zone? Because literally all of the Southeast states, they are still dealing with the issue of IPOB sit-at-home issue.
Not every, like in Onitsha, for example, there are clear movements in Onitsha. And just Onitsha per se, between Onitsha axis and partially Obaru area, every other place is a no-go area.
So, for instance, let me also ask you, are there names you're already considering that are going to give him a run for his money?
There are names, of course. For example, in Anambra State today, if it comes to APC, I do not think there is any other person that will come or has come or can come that will beat the person of Senator Ifeanyi Ubah. I don't think so.
But he lost in the last election. Okay, not him. It's Andy Ubah that lost in the last election. So is this more like pushing for Ifeanyi Ubah to run for governor in 2025?
I will wish he runs. I will wish he runs. You see, when a man emerges out of nothing, you can imagine what he will do if he given the opportunity out of something. He has the capacity.
All right, so how much of in-house collaboration is going on with the APC? Because I know, I stand to be corrected, Andy Ubah tried it the other time and it didn't succeed. Now you're calling new names in all of this. But housekeeping has to be done first in ensuring that everybody is on board. And clearly, with your approach everybody seemed not to be on board. And if you go into a battle with a divided house, you clearly already know the answer to that question.
Well, coincidentally, Ifeanyi is a person who can bring people together. He is a person who can reach out. He is a person who understands what it takes and the importance of reaching out. The truth be told, if in a household, a royal household, you have a houseboy, when the king dies, he doesn't have an heir. It doesn't give an edge for the servant to become the heir to the throne. Something has to be done. So that's exactly what it is.
All right. Mr. Mike Banefo, APC chief saying from Anambra State. There's still a long way to go in this conversation. But we must thank you for coming on the program and airing your view, and we wish your party the very best. We always wish every party the very best. It's a level playing field. It's democracy. Everybody has opportunity to have their say. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzanga. Good night, and God bless the Federal Republic.